Good morning. Thanks for joining us today for a stakeholder meeting for 30 Texas Administrative Code Chapter 30 Rulemaking. We're here today to solicit informal comments on the non-statutory changes included in the proposed rulemaking to amend 30 TAC Chapter 30 Occupational Licenses and Registrations. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what a stakeholder meeting entails today and what you can expect from the meeting. We're first going to have an introduction of the TCEQ staff involved in the rulemaking, and we'll have a presentation from program staff. And then following that, there will be oral comments by stakeholders with a limited Q&A with program staff. We also have our live event Q&A chat function. If you have any questions for our staff and you did not call in today, I did put that call-in number in the live event Q&A chat. And so if you have any questions and you would prefer to use our live event Q&A chat, you can type them in and we will get to them in order of who has typed them in first. As I mentioned, I also put the call-in number in to this chat function, and you can feel free to call in to that number using the conference ID, and you'll be able to speak directly into the mic to ask your questions or provide your comment. We just ask that you be mindful of others and take turns remembering to turn off your mic when not addressing staff with your questions or comments. And if you're live streaming, please ask your questions or comments using the Q&A chat function, and we'll read them in order of submittal. Okay, I guess we can get started with our presentation now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Haya Zeman. I am the Deputy Director of the Occupational Licensing and Registration Division, and I want to welcome everyone today to this stakeholder meeting. We are very much looking forward to hearing your comments and your concerns. Keep in mind that we have a few areas in our proposed rule that we are seeking your feedback specifically. As Becca will explain later, we do not have latitude to make any changes to any of the statutory mandates, so we'll specifically indicate which topics we are seeking your feedback on. I want to introduce all the occupational licensing staff involved in this rulemaking that are present here today to answer your questions. The first person I would like to introduce is Becca Moore. She's my special assistant for the Occupational Licensing and Registration Division, and she'll be providing the bulk of the presentation today. We have also Tamara Calhoun. She's a section manager for the Occupational Licensing section. We also have Kenneth Smith. He's a program support coordinator for the Occupational Licensing section and special assistant to Tamara Calhoun. Teresa L. Etheridge is the team leader for the Occupational Licensing team, and Paul Munguia is a technical specialist for the Occupational Licensing training team. Now let me go ahead and introduce you to Becca Moore, my special assistant, who will be able to provide an overview of the proposed rule changes and will specifically indicate where we are seeking your feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Haya. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Becca Moore. I am representing the Occupational Licensing and Registration section of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And as Haya mentioned, we'll be using this time to share the concepts for the rulemaking and hear from y'all about any questions and concerns you may have about this rulemaking. Feel free to type any questions or comments in the Q&A chat, and we will do our best to answer them after the presentation. So first, to give you an idea on what I will be presenting about, first I'll talk about the subchapters that are open, the changes to the statute from the last legislative session, new provisional licenses for water and wastewater D operators, new fingerprinting requirements for all new and renewal licenses, new resiliency training requirements for water operators, a reduction in the required continuing education requirements to renew a leaking petroleum storage tank project manager license, as well as updates to training terminology and other minor changes. And at the very end, I'll go over the rulemaking process, the timeline, and the specific items that we are asking for feedback on. So first, the affected subchapters. 30 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 30 for occupational licenses and registrations has 12 subchapters. Subchapter A includes all the administrative information, such as general definitions, the application process, training approval, and the criminal history and review process, while the rest of the subchapters are specific to each licensing program. Currently, only the subchapters listed here, subchapter A, which again is the administration portion, subchapter E for leaking petroleum storage tank correction action, project managers and specialists, subchapter J for wastewater operators and operations companies, and subchapter K for public water system operators and operations companies are open for this rulemaking. So no other subchapters can be added to the rulemaking at this stage, and therefore we cannot make any changes to any of those specific subchapters. For the statutory changes, I want to point out the difference between the statute and rule. So the legislator sets the statutes, and we have to follow the statute and implement it and put it into our rules. Some statutes give state agencies the authority on how to implement the statute, and I will point out which parts of the proposed changes that we kind of have that authority and some leeway, and we will ask for feedback on those. There were 3 bills that were passed during the 88th legislative session that require changes to Chapter 30. 2 of those are pretty much direct implementation from the statute, while the third I'll go into a little more detail on kind of which portions are from the statute and which portions we are proposing. So the first bill is House Bill 2453, which allows agencies to issue a digital license, certificate, or registration instead of a physical paper license. TCEQ does not plan to transition to digital licenses only at this time, but we will be updating the rule to be consistent with the statute. The second bill is Senate Bill 422, which requires TCEQ to process applications and issue licenses within 30 days for military service members, spouses of military service members, or veterans that have a current license from another jurisdiction that has licensing requirements that are considered substantially equivalent to TCEQ's requirements for the same license. The expedited process, that 30-day timeline, will only apply to applications that are administratively complete. So if any of those applications are held back due to criminal history or other deficiencies, the expedited timeline would not apply. This also means that these applications are going to be processed ahead of other applications, and that might have a slight impact on processing time for all other applications. However, we don't expect that impact to be significant. The third bill is for provisional licenses. House Bill 1845 was passed during the 88th legislative session. It creates provisional licenses for Class D wastewater and water operators. The intent of this license is to provide an opportunity for individuals to work in the water and wastewater operator field while earning their high school diploma or GED. This provisional license program is available to anyone, regardless of age, who does not have a high school diploma or GED, that completes the training, passes the applicable exam, and acts under the direct supervision of a license holder. So everything that's laid out here on this slide is specifically laid out in statute. So this is, we can't take any comments on this because we have no leeway on anything that's on this slide here. However, we do have the ability to determine some of the details on how the program will be implemented, and I'll go into some of those, the proposed implementation. The water and wastewater D operator licenses now, not the provisional license, they require a high school diploma or equivalent. So one of the main differences is that these new provisional license does not require a high school education. An individual without a high school diploma who completes the required training would pay the $74 application fee. They would need to pass the criminal history check and pass the applicable exam and then they would be eligible for the Provisional D license. I just want to note that the exam for the provisional license is the same, or would be the same as the current D licensing exam for water or wastewater operators. An individual with a provisional license, according to the statute, must act under the direct supervision of a license holder. But TCEQ is proposing that the provisional license be valid for 2 years, not be renewable or reobtainable, meaning that an individual will have to obtain their high school diploma or equivalent and then apply for a D license or higher after that 2-year provisional license expires. We have a provisional license for the municipal solid waste operators, and that is valid for 2 years and is not renewable or reobtainable. So TCEQ is proposing that the new provisional licenses have similar restrictions for consistency purposes. Just want to note that 3-year licenses have a fee of $111. So if this license is 2 years, then it's prorated at $74. So that's where that fee comes from. There are no continuing education requirements for the provisional license, and the provisional license does not affect or replace the operator and training program that some utilities have. So the proposed process to upgrade a license has 2 options depending on when the application is submitted. So if the application is submitted before the expiration date of the provisional license, an individual with that provisional license would need to submit proof of their high school diploma or equivalent, apply to convert the license to a regular operator D license or higher if they have enough experience. And so if they apply for the D license before the expiration of their license, they would not need to retake the D exam. If they had applied for a higher level license, a C level, because they have enough experience to get that, they would need to meet the training, education, and experience requirements for that license, and then also take that exam. If the application is submitted after the date of the expiration date of that provisional license, that individual would need to submit proof of a high school diploma or equivalent, apply for a new operator D license, and retake the exam. So the main difference there is if your provisional license expires, you would have to retake that D exam. So next I will talk about the proposed fingerprinting requirement. So a little background on that. TCEQ is required by Texas Occupations Code, the statute, to automatically revoke a license or registration and upon an individual's imprisonment following a criminal conviction, felony community supervision, revocation of parole, or revocation of mandatory supervision. But currently TCEQ does not have a way to know when a licensee is imprisoned to a felony conviction until they apply for a renewal application. And that could potentially be 3 years after the conviction. So TCEQ cannot meet the requirement of this statute in a timely manner. I just want to clarify that there are 2 types of revocation processes, and the one we were focusing on today is the automatic revocation that was on the previous slide. And then there's an additional revocation process that we are required to review all criminal history for all applications for new and renewal. And we have the authority to deny, revoke, or suspend a license based on criminal history or environmental compliance. And that denial process is subject to a contested hearing process, while the automatic revocation that we're talking about here does not have any sort of contested hearing process. It's automatic and immediate. So going back to the fingerprinting, the proposed rule will require all applicants for new and renewal licenses to submit to the FBI fingerprinting for the criminal history review unless a waiver is requested and granted. I'll go into a little more detail on the waiver in a few minutes, and that's one of the areas that we do want some feedback on. So through the FBI fingerprint subscription, the TCEQ will receive notification through the Criminal Justice Wrap-Back Program of Texas. So when a person who has fingerprints on file with the FBI is arrested or has criminal activity associated with those fingerprints, we will receive that information. TCEQ is already receiving criminal history information from the Department of Public Safety, but the fingerprinting process speeds up the process and allows TCEQ to meet that statutory requirement to automatically revoke a license. It also lets us see national criminal history information rather than just the Texas DPS information to better protect public safety. So the proposed fingerprinting process is as follows, and this is similar to other licensing agencies that require fingerprinting, like for your PE or with TDLR. An individual seeking a new license or renewal of a license will first need to apply for a license with us, with TCEQ. They will not be able to schedule their fingerprinting appointment until they have submitted that application. And that's because they need a special TCEQ code to set up their fingerprinting appointment. The individual will need to schedule a fingerprinting appointment using the TCEQ specific code at any Identico location. Fingerprinting locations are widely available across the state. Identico charges a fee, it's around $40 for the fingerprinting service. Identico will submit the digital fingerprints to the Department of Public Safety and the FBI electronically, and those results will be automatically shared with us. With the occupational licensing section. The applicant will notify the TCEQ that fingerprinting has been completed so that TCEQ can continue to process the application. TCEQ will review the criminal history to determine if an applicant is eligible for a license. If eligible, TCEQ will complete the processing of the application, and if all other requirements have been met, they would be, for new licenses, the applicant would be eligible to take the exam, and for renewals, the license would be issued. If the individual is not eligible based on the criminal history review, the process for denying a license and the contested case process, that remains the same. Just a few things I want to point out. If you have been fingerprinted for a license from another agency, or fingerprinted for any other reason, you will still need to get fingerprinted and go through this process. The code that you use to schedule your Identico appointment is TCEQ specific, meaning that information can only be shared with TCEQ. The fingerprinting information cannot and is not shared between agencies. And information we receive is only for the licensing purposes and is not shared within the agency. Once an applicant or a licensee has a fingerprinting with TCEQ, as long as you maintain an active license with TCEQ, you will not need to get fingerprinted again. You won't need to pay that $40 fee again, and you won't need to provide any additional criminal history information for subsequent license renewals, even if you're applying for multiple licenses, unless specifically requested by us. So the proposed draft rules will include an option for an individual that is unable to get fingerprinted to request a waiver from fingerprinting. So for example, like high school students that are under 17 and are applying for the provisional license may not be required to get fingerprinted. Individuals intending to request a waiver must submit their waiver and get approved before they submit their application. So because this may delay the permitting processing time, you would need to submit that well before your license expires. This is one of those things, this waiver is one of the things that we are seeking feedback on kind of what criteria we would be looking for that may or may not end up in the rule language, but we would have a guidance on how this waiver would work. So next I'll talk about the resiliency training requirements for water operators. So following Winter Storm Uri and SB3 from the 87th legislative session, TCEQ developed requirements for resiliency training for water operators to be better prepared for future power outages and rolling blackouts. And so we are now working on implementing them. We had the authority to require this, but now we are codifying it and putting it in rules. So applicants that submit their application for a new water operator license on or after April 1st of 2024 will be required to take what we're calling the Resiliency Overview course or the revised Basic Waterworks Operation Core course. Revised meaning that those resiliency topics that are in the overview course have been incorporated into that course. For renewals for licenses that expire on or after April 1st, 2024, those individuals will need to take at least 2 hours of resiliency continuing education credits per renewal cycle. So that this is an ongoing requirement. They will also have 2 renewal cycles to take that resiliency overview course. If an individual takes the overview course, that would count toward the 2 hours of required resiliency, but it can only be counted toward that once. The overview course and resiliency CEs, the continuing education credits, those count toward the required 30 CEs to renew a license. They're not in addition to it. And so once the individual has taken the resiliency overview, they will need to take the CE training to fulfill the renewal requirements for every renewal thereafter. We currently have 7 providers that are approved to teach the overview course and 2 providers approved to teach the continuing education courses for resiliency. Several free TCQ, they're called Directed Assistant Modules, or known as DAMs, are slated for approval later this year for continuing education credit for resiliency. For the topics that are included in the resiliency training, the core course, the overview course, must cover an overview of all of the following topics. So we have Incident Command System or National Incident Management System, State Disaster Assistant, Emergency Preparedness Plans, Mutual Aid Agreements, Critical Components, which may include cybersecurity training. So the overview course has to include all of those, and then the resiliency continuing education courses must include more in-depth material on one or more of these topics. This curriculum guidance that I'm showing here won't actually be included in the rule, but it is available as a regulatory guidance document called RG 637. The guidance for resiliency training requirements for water operators, and at the end we'll include a link for this in the chat as well. But informational purposes, wanted to make sure we covered this as well, even though it's not directly into the rule. So next I'll talk about a leaking petroleum storage tank project manager, the credit hours to renew that license. So TCQ is proposing to reduce the number of continuing education credits required to renew this license from 32 hours to 20 hours. We've currently individuals are required to complete those 32 hours every 3 years to be eligible to renew their license. However, the regulated community has expressed difficulty in meeting this requirement based on the available TCQ approved training. Staff believes that reducing the required CEs from 32 to 20 will address the lack of available TCQ approved trainings without any detrimental effects on the environment or public health. Just want to note that TCQ does not develop or offer the training for this license, we just approve it. And also wanted to note that there are several other licenses that the 20 hours matches up with a lot of other licenses in terms of the number of CEs that are required to renew the license. And next I'll talk about the training terminology and other minor updates. So TCQ is proposing to update training definitions and terms to be consistent with current training technology and updated approval processes. So I'll explain a little bit more of those in detail. The proposed changes will also remove the option for water and wastewater operators to renew their license by examination rather than through continuing education credits. But with the new resiliency continuing education requirement, this is no longer a viable option for water operators, since water operators will have to take the resiliency training as part of the CEs. So if they were able to renew by testing, they would not have to take the resiliency training. It's also proposed to be removed to provide consistency across similar licenses. There are no other licenses that have this option to renew by examination, and not many operators use this option anyway. The proposed update will specify an instructor qualification fee of $10 per course for instructor qualifications that are not part of initial training application for a core course. So TCQ verifies that an instructor is qualified to teach a course. This is usually a part of a core course review, but it can also be submitted after a review. So this fee is kind of separating it from the rest of the course review, so that if there is a standalone kind of review that we need to do, we can charge a fee for that. There will also be other minor updates as necessary to provide consistency with other licensing requirements and rules and improve readability, just make things kind of easier to understand. So going a little more into detail on the training delivery. So the proposed rule updates kind of make a few definitions a little bit clearer. So there are 3 training delivery methods: in-person, live online, and self-paced training. So in-person training, self-explanatory, the instructor is at the same place as the student, same place and same time. For live online, that is delivered virtually in real time, but separated by distance. So the instructor and the student are, taking the course. It's at the same time, but separated by, many miles. Now the self-paced training, that is kind of using different technologies with a separation of place and time. So for example, it could be a correspondence course, a pre-recorded training that you kind of take at your own pace. So there's that distance of time and place. So currently in the rule, there is no definition for live online, but during the pandemic, when training went mostly virtual, the training team had to develop methods to approve live online training. And so we're taking the opportunity to update the rule to be consistent with that current training technology and terminology. The proposed updates also make clear what the different types of trainings are. So we have our delivery method, but then we also have the training types. So we'll define classroom training, conferences, pre-recorded training, correspondence training, association meetings, and other professional activities. Now, not all of these are new definitions, but I just kind of wanted to break out the difference between the delivery method and the training type. And so lastly, I'll go over the rulemaking timeline and the items that we are seeking feedback on, and give some information and some web pages for y'all for more informational purposes. So if you are not familiar with the rulemaking process, it is quite long. As you can see, we are currently holding an informal stakeholder meeting. We'll then take the comments that we receive to finalize the draft rules tentatively by next month. We will then go to the commissioner's agenda for proposal for permission to publish in the Texas Register. That's when the draft rules are available for public viewing. So then after that, the public will have 30 days to comment on the proposed rulemaking. And towards the end of the comment period, we will hold a formal public hearing to receive comments. And TCQ will then respond to the comments received and make any necessary changes to the draft rule language. And following that, we will go to the commissioner's agenda for permission to adopt the rules, and then the rule will become effective. So as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to point out some of the areas that we are asking for feedback on. So first one, are there any concerns on having a digital license instead of a paper pocket card? Again, the statute says that we are able to to offer that, but doesn't require us to do so. So that's something that we would look at for the future. Next, any comments on the provisional license being valid for 2 years? Any input on criteria to determine who is eligible for a waiver from fingerprinting? Just want to point out there is no waiver from a criminal history review that is required, but we are exploring options for a waiver from the fingerprinting. So if you got the waiver from the fingerprinting, you would have to submit a paper form and kind of use the process as it is now. Additionally, any concerns with reducing the number of CE credits required to renew the LPST, the project manager license that I talked about going from 32 to 20 hours, any concerns there, as well as any suggestions for other resiliency topics that could be eligible for resiliency credit. We strongly encourage any training providers to develop resiliency training for approval so we can add to that list since water operators will be required to take 2 CE resiliency credits. And then for more information, you can visit our licensing webpage as well as our rulemaking webpage. The rulemaking webpage will be updated as we move through the rulemaking process. I also wanted to kind of put out here the RG, the guidance for resiliency training requirements for water operators and training providers. That is available on our licensing page, but we'll also put the link in the chat as well. I've also added the link to the existing rules for 30 TAC Chapter 30, so you have that for reference. And with that, I'll turn it over back to Gwen for questions. But I'll leave up here, so if anyone needs to jot this down for how to submit written comments, I'll leave that here. I do just want to note that for written comments, please include the rulemaking project number so that we make sure it gets to us. Right. And back to you, Gwen.
Hello. Thank you for that, Becca. So from right now, we will begin our Q&A, or if you want to call in or type out any comments that you might have. First, I'm going to open it up for, we have one question in the live event Q&A that I will read out and our team can get answered. And that comment is, can we get some clarification on the fingerprinting? One slide showed for new and renewals that fingerprinting was required, but a separate slide said that if fingerprinting has already been done, then you do not have to have fingerprints done again.
I can take that one. When this is Haya. Hello.
Yep. Yeah.
Can people hear me? Oh, okay. I'm so
Yes.
sorry. I didn't know if they could hear me.
Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't see the chat anymore. Hold on. So basically, the fingerprinting is going to be, right now everybody has to undergo a criminal history, and people have the option to either do a paper attestation or a fingerprinting. So the fingerprinting would be for everyone that comes for a new license or for a renewal of a license. And then I couldn't see the second part of the question.
If you want to go under published, it's there, but I can read it out again. Okay. Can we get some clarification on the fingerprinting? One slide showed for new and renewals that fingerprinting was required, but a separate slide said that if fingerprinting has already been done, then you do not have to have fingerprints done again.
Okay, so then the difference is that if you select the paper process, like we have right now, that option, then every time you come for another action, whether it's applying for a new license or renewal of a license, you have to provide that information again and again. The nice thing about the fingerprinting is it's a lot more efficient. So once you get fingerprinted once and you continue to have an active license with the TCEQ, then that individual does not have to have any more fingerprints ever. So you don't have to do any more criminal history submittals anymore, even if you apply for different licenses. So that's going to apply to all the occupational licenses that you have, as long as they're here with us at the agency. If you did fingerprinting with another agency, then that information will not convey. But as long as it's within the TCEQ and there's an active license on file, then it's a one-time thing and then never again. So it saves that extra work. I hope that answers your question.
And if you need any follow-up to that question, you can always feel free to use that call-in number or put another comment in the Q&A chat. But I will go to our next one. A comment is just yes to digital license. And the next question that we have from the chat is, who can teach a TCEQ DAM class for credit?
I mean, Tamara, I don't know if you have any more information about this, but basically those are subject matter experts. I think they are under contract with the drinking water supply, and they're the ones developing that. So probably we wouldn't be the best people to tell you how those DAM modules are developed. I don't know if anybody in the occupational licensing staff has any additional information to share for this question.
Just to follow up and to confirm what you're saying, Haya, I think it's going to be probably TCEQ staff, but that would probably be better answered by our water supply division, who is actually creating those modules.
Thank you for confirming that, Tamara. Thank you.
Okay, and that is the last question in the Q&A. So I'm going to open it up. If anybody has wanted to call in to ask any comments or questions, feel free to unmute your mic and let me know now. Yeah, there is about 20 to 30 second delay for those live streaming. So I'm going to give a few moments to see if anyone called in with any questions. And if you did use that call-in number, you can press *6 to unmute your mic. And while we're waiting for that, if anyone has any other questions that they want to pop into the Q&A chat, we are here and available to answer any of them. And we do have that slide up where you can find where to submit written comments, which will be open until 11:59 p.m. on March 12th, 2024. And it looks like we do have another question in the chat. For the LPSD CAPM license renewal, will you start allowing the submittal of CEUs for things like relevant workshops or organizational meetings with relevant content?
I'll defer that question to the training team, if anybody in the training team is able to answer that question.
I can take that question again.
Okay,
So any training that is approved by TCEQ for continuing education will count towards the CEs for the license renewal. So as long as it's approved prior to, by TCEQ, we will accept it.
Thank you. Next question is, would the pocket card still be available if the digital licenses are being done?
So I'll take this one. Right now, the statute is basically allowing TCEQ the authority or the option to use digital licenses. In this particular rulemaking, we're not proposing to start issuing digital licenses. We just wanted to see how the public felt. And if we end up going through the digital license option, then at that point, we would like to have more feedback on the public as far as whether, I mean, ideally, if we offer the digital license, it would be to reduce paper and shipping and the cost involved, and for people to be able to print their own licenses. But we don't really have a very detailed process in mind. So if somebody were to request a paper license in lieu of that, we could definitely deal with that on a case-by-case basis and honor that request. But I guess the details will need to be ironed out. At this point, we are not going to move forward with a digital license just yet.
Thank you, Haya. And the next question, is there a separate TCEQ approval process for resiliency training, or if you are approved for a course already, can you teach it?
Yeah, the answer is no, but Becca or Tamara, anybody wants, or anybody in the training team, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, this is Paul. Let me reread it just so I'm clear. Is there a separate TCQ approval process for resiliency training, or if you're approved for a course already, you can teach it? So this resiliency is very specific. So prior to this implementation of this resiliency requirement, there have been resiliency, quote unquote, resiliency courses that are approved. But this is a very specific thing. We have listed criteria and topics, subject topics that must be approved. So for this resiliency training to be approved as the required resiliency, it must be approved by TCEQ and reviewed and approved. And on our website, on the TCEQ website under training, we have exactly what is approved for resiliency. So if it's not on that list, it's not going to meet this requirement. So you'll need to, as a training provider, you'll need to submit it to us and request a resiliency review. And for the public, you'll need to look on our website for resiliency, and those are the approved courses.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And the next question refers to resiliency training as well. For resiliency training, please confirm water operator refers to water only or includes wastewater as well.
So I'll take this one. So at this point, the requirement is only for water operators to do the resiliency training for new and renewal of licenses and for all the levels of water operators. However, the wastewater operators will be able to take the resiliency if they wish and be counted as continuing education credit. So it's going to be approved for continuing education credit for wastewater operators, but it's not going to be required. Only required for water.
Thank you. And next question is, when will be the effective date for implementing fingerprinting?
The implementation of the fingerprinting requirement is going to be on the date that the entire rule package gets adopted by the Commission. So as Becca was explaining, this is just a very, very preliminary phase. Then after that, we're going to be drafting the rule language, and then we'll go to the Commission for permission to share the actual rule language with the public. And at that point, there's going to be another public comment period. And only after that, then when we go to the adoption, then at that point, the effective date of this rule would be in place. We anticipate right now what, Becca, you said the end of the year for this year. We don't have an exact date, so it would depend on what agenda date, but we would make it effective at that point.
Yeah, the effective date is 20 days after that adoption agenda. So that would be once that adoption agenda gets set, then the effective date will be 20 days after that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we are done with the questions in the Q&A, so I'll open it up again. If anybody had called in and wanted to provide comments or ask any questions to that call-in number, please do so now by unmuting your mic. And as I was mentioning earlier, there are several places to submit these comments. We do have our fax 4808@tceq.texas.gov, and the best way to submit it would be electronically through our TCEQ public comments page, which is tceq.commentinput.com, and then you can search this rule and submit your comments electronically that way. And we'll be accepting comments on this rule package until 11:59 p.m. on March 12th, 2024. Oh, we got a couple more questions. Will Identigo be the only fingerprinting company that can be used?
I believe I can take that one. Right now, that is the only one that I am aware of that allows us to use that fingerprinting the FBI has an agreement with. So if other ones were to be added in the future, then we would expand that.
There is one more question.
Yes. Pulling that up. Will this presentation be available to view on the TCEQ website, or can it be emailed if requested?
If the public would find having access to this presentation helpful to them, we can do either. We can make it available through the website, or we can send a copy as requested.
And if you would like to email to request that, you can email rules, RULES, rules@tceq.texas.gov. I will put that in the chat. Next question, do you foresee licensed operators being required to be fully bonded in the future?
There has not been any kind of discussion to that effect. I think that would need to come from the legislature for us to implement anything like that.
And it does look like we have a request to have that posted, the slides posted on a website.
If we do post it on the website, it will be on that rulemaking page. So I put that in the chat as well. So if you want to bookmark that, that's kind of where we will have all of the updates for the rulemaking, including when the draft rules are available and all of that. So that is where we would put the this presentation as well.
And again, if anyone did call in, feel free to just jump in and unmute your mic at this point in time. Question, will fingerprinting have any effect on second chance employment programs?
Fingerprinting.
Hiya, do you want me to take that,
yeah.
or do you want to take that?
Why don't I start, and then I was trying to read the question. I can start, and then you can expand. Will fingerprinting have an effect on second chance employment programs? The fingerprinting process would not change the intent of the criminal history review process. This is just the method by which we obtain the information, whether it's by paper or fingerprinting. So there will be no change in regards to that. Becca, is there anything else that you have to add?
Nope, that was pretty much it. It's just a different method of how we get our the information. So our review of that will, as Hiya said, will not change. So it would not affect that program.
And then I think that there is another question.
Yep. And next one is, would the fingerprinting still be required if an applicant holds a license from TCOLE?
I do not know what TCOLE stands for, but as long as the license is held by a different agency, the fingerprinting contract is just exclusively for that agency. So if somebody had been fingerprinted for the engineering board or for DDLR, like Becca was mentioning, that's not going to work for us, and vice versa. So you would need to be fingerprinted specifically for licensing here with TCEQ. But once you're fingerprinted for one license, you don't have to get fingerprinted again for any other TCEQ license, as long as there is an active license on our records. So I don't know what this TCOL is, but I would imagine that's a different agency.
And if you, that commenter, if you did have, further questions on that, you can always follow up with the chat. And next question, is there an age restriction minor for provisional licenses?
No, right now we don't have an age restriction for the license, or even the D license. The D license, that is not the provisional license, the permanent license, that one just has the requirement of high school diploma or a GED. The provisional license would waive the requirement of the high school diploma or the GED, but is not going to impose any kind of age limitation. So if a person that is a bit younger wants to pursue that license, they can. Now, on the criminal history side, any convictions that happen as a minor, somebody younger than the age 17, those will not be considered either. We only consider, so juvenile convictions are not considered. So somebody that is younger might not need to be, they might need to go, not go through the criminal history process.
Thank you. And another comment is, can you post the presentation to YouTube? And I believe if we're posting the slides, then they will be posted to that rulemaking webpage, which you can find at the top of the Q&A chat. Specifically the rulemaking webpage, which can also be found in the Texas Register notice. But yes, we will be sure. And if you also want to request those slides, you can email us at rules@tcq.texas.gov, but we want to make sure that we provide those to those who are wishing to receive them. Question, I think a follow-up is, so would that require a waiver?
I'm not really sure what they're referring to. As far as the minor, no, the minor would not require a waiver. The waiver is only for doing the fingerprinting. So the fingerprinting we're proposing to require to all new and renewal applications or applicants. And if somebody has any kind of hardship or impediment to make it to a fingerprinting site, or there are high school students that cannot go to a fingerprinting site or any other reason, then they will be applying for the waiver, but the waiver is only for the fingerprinting process. So in lieu of that, they would need to do the paper one.
Oh, yes, meaning on the age was, yeah. Good, thank you for clarifying that. The next question was, any TCEQ license will require fingerprinting?
Yes, all the TCEQ licenses will require fingerprinting. That's the proposal right now.
And it looks like we did have a follow-up that TCOLE is for police law enforcement.
Okay, correct. So then no, whatever they do for that agency would not apply to ours.
And then the last question that we have in the Q&A chat at the moment is there a timeline established to implement 20 hours basic courses in high school classes?
Well, that's a different initiative that is not, it doesn't have anything to do with this rulemaking. So we're working on that behind the scenes with a couple of different associations, one for water and the other one for wastewater. The water one is a little bit ahead in timeline than the wastewater. And right now the hope is to maybe launch it as a pilot in the fall of 2024. But we still have a couple of modules that need to be reviewed and approved by us before it can be launched. So hopefully if everything goes as planned, it should be on cue to be launched as a pilot and then becoming available statewide after that.
Thank you. And we are done with our questions in the Q&A chat for the moment. If you are thinking more, we still have time available to ask any questions or provide any comments to our staff. And again, if you did call in, you can press *6 to unmute your mic to ask your questions or provide any informal comments. And here's another question. Can you please state again, why are the fingerprint requirements being implemented? My understanding is it is because TCEQ cannot keep up revoking licenses. What is to gain over the current background check process?
Okay, so I guess I'll attempt this one as well. It's not like we cannot keep up. It's just that the way the information right now is being transferred, we do not do a criminal background check on people unless they have an application active on site. So if something were, so then we have a requirement by statute, is actually a law, that somebody that goes to prison due to a felony conviction may not be licensed, and the license has to be immediately revoked without a due process, without being eligible for a contested case process. Unfortunately, we don't have a quick notification, so then we don't find out about this information until the person comes back to renew their license. And at that point could be 3 years later. So if the person was imprisoned and then they get released from prison, this could be a violent person. They could get released from prison. We don't know about it. They continue to operate under their license because the license has not expired. Then we wouldn't find out about it until they come back for renewal of the application. And when we do the other background check, that's when we find out about it. And in the meantime, the public could have been in jeopardy during that time. That the person was released, and we were not able to review that. So that's the main reason to implement this fingerprinting, because then this way we will have the information in real time, and then being able to more safely protect the public, the general public. In addition to that, is going to make things more efficient on our part and also on the part of the applicant, because once they do it one time, they don't have to do it again. So hopefully it can streamline the process and can allow us to process the applications a bit quicker. I think there is another question, Wen.
Yeah, just getting, yeah. Will the applicant be responsible for paying the fingerprinting fee?
Yes, it would be. TCEQ does not collect those fees. Those fees go directly to the Contigo site, and so yeah, the person would be. And some of these sites I think charge $30. I mean, $40 is an average, but yes, it would be the responsibility of the applicant. But again, it's a one-time fee, a forever fee, and then it doesn't have to be paid again. The same thing as the computer-based testing centers that assess a fee for people to go and take the exam with them.
Great. And then we have another one. Could the waiver for fingerprinting be based on strongly held religious beliefs or privacy concerns?
Well, this is precisely what this stakeholder meeting is about. So we can get your feedback about what types of waiver categories we would apply in this particular case, and if that is one of the categories, they could apply for a waiver for sure. So right now we're trying to shape up what those criteria would be. So this is particularly the kind of input that we would welcome in this rulemaking. So we can define the process or the conditions for obtaining the waiver.
And if someone has committed a felony, are they permanently ineligible for a license?
No. It depends on the nature of the felony. So the automatic revocation is for a felony conviction that resulted in incarceration. But once the person gets released from the prison system, if they commit a crime that is not going to be related to the license, or the license is not going to provide access to commit the same type of crime again, then they'll be able to apply for a license. And also our licenses are ranked by risk. So some licenses have higher degree of risk because of contact with the public than others. So it would depend on what license they're applying for and what is the specific crime that they committed. But the answer is no, it's not a blanket ineligibility statement at all. It just depends on the situation. Like, for instance, driving violations would not be a reason to withhold a license.
there's any follow-up questions to anything discussed today, please feel free to ask them now. Will the renewal of a D water license still be allowed moving forward as long as the individual is not a site supervisor or works in a plant setting?
I'm going to let you or your staff answer that.
Yes, I can take this. Being able to renew whether it's a water or a wastewater license is going to depend on what type and size of system and what your role is in there. So that is still going to remain in place. And that does not have anything to do with the actual provisional license. Since the provisional license is not renewable, that individual will then either have to convert to an actual D license, or if they have the qualifications, they have the right to upgrade to a C or higher, whatever they qualify for. But the rules that are in place right now on whether they can renew those Ds is still in place, but it only applies to the license, not the provisional.
And we appreciate everyone's participation and questions today. So we are still available to answer any if you have any or would like to provide any informal comments. And the slide that's up right now is where you can find more information. If you want to go find that rulemaking page or any of the other information that was discussed. And here's another question. Will there be a time limit to get fingerprinted once the application is submitted?
Hi, I'll take that one again. Yes, there is. So once you submit the application and we send you the code to submit to Identigo, when you get your fingerprinted, then you'll have 120 days. That's with any deficiency on your licensing application. If it's a new license, you have 120 days. If it's a renewal of a license, it's 30 days. So whatever the rule allows to clear a deficiency. Great question.
And just to reiterate, we will be accepting written comments on this stakeholder meeting until 11:59 p.m. on March 12th. And you can submit those on our fax system, or the better one to do, which is very user-friendly, is the tceq.commentinput.com. That is our TCEQ public comment page. And as the comments are slowing down a little bit in questions, we will give about a 5 to 10 minute warning on if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat now. We'll be staying on the line for about 5 to 10 more minutes, depending on how many more questions or comments that we get, but we are still available to answer any. So in about 5 to 10 minutes, we will be wrapping up our stakeholder meeting for today. So if you called in and would like to make any comments or ask questions, unmute your mic. And it looks like we do have another question. Will consideration be given for the lead time to apply for a renewal with regards to availability of Identico appointments? I.e., the last time I had to get fingerprinted through them, it took 3 months to get an appointment.
Yeah, I'm going to try to tee it off, and then Tamara will confirm this. But my belief is that in cases like that, they can request an extension to fulfill the deficiency, and we would then grant an extension if they have difficulty with securing an appointment. Tamara, would that be the case?
Yeah, we can actually accommodate that. We've never actually heard of that because there are people now that do opt voluntarily to do their fingerprints. And we've sent them the deficiency letter, and majority of them or all of them that we're aware of have been able to get it within that time frame. So we haven't heard that it's taken that long, but we would definitely consider that if that was the case.
And we will stay on the line till 3:15. So if you have your questions, that's about 7 more minutes. So if you would like to ask them or provide any comments, now would be the time to do so. And if you would like to follow along to see that rulemaking process, the first time the public will be able to have access to that rule, the proposed rule language will be on the backup date, which is 19 days prior to the proposed rulemaking agenda, and you'll be able to find all of that information out on the rulemaking webpage that's provided. And we do have another question. Why couldn't TCEQ just check backgrounds more often? Why should the operators be tasked with this fingerprinting cost and inconvenience?
Okay, I guess I'll attempt this one. We have about 55,000 licenses, active licenses in our that are environmental TCQ licenses. And we have basically 15 staff operating the licensing program. It is not feasible for us to be conducting fingerprinting. Plus, we are only allowed to conduct the fingerprinting when there's an application, an active application that has been submitted that needs to be processed. So it's not feasible to be conducting these background checks more often. Or not is not feasible or even allowable because we only can do it when there is an active license on in-house or an active application. I'm sorry. Tamara, is there anything, or Becca, that you want to add to this?
I don't have anything additional to add. That's about it.
Yeah, same here. You covered it.
Thank you for those answers and for these great questions today. We will do have about 4 more minutes left if there are any additional questions. And to reiterate, if you would like to request those slides, you can email us at rules@tcq.texas.gov, and we will be accepting written comments on the stakeholder process until 11:59 p.m. on March 12th, 2024. And you can use our TCQ public page, tcq.commentinput.com. And you can follow along on that rulemaking webpage that was provided, that will be also provided in the slides, that's provided in the chat, in order to see what these timelines are, the upcoming timelines are. There will be an additional time to be able to submit public comments during the public comment period following the proposed rulemaking agenda to be able to participate in this rulemaking further. Do have about 2 more minutes if anyone does have any last minute questions that they would like to ask staff today. And this might be for a comment for the team, is they're getting an error when trying to view the rulemaking webpage. If
I'm gonna double check that link and re-put it in the chat. I just maybe for some reason it just didn't copy, so give me a second just to make sure I got the right one.
Yeah, it works for me. If you're using it, so if you are trying to click on any of the hyperlinks from the Texas Register notice, that the Texas Register for some reason adds extra hyphens to hyperlinks, so that would make it an error when you tried to open it. But the link in the chat did open up for me, so I can't be more help there. But yeah.
I reposted it. It's also, if you can get to the licensing page, at the very top, there are a couple announcements. And at the top of there, you can click to the rulemaking page. You can also click to the RG that I mentioned about resiliency. So those would be at the top. So for some reason that link isn't working and you can get to the licensing page, you should be able to find it really easily and then bookmark it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to our attention. We do have, it looks like another question here. If someone is identified to have a felony through fingerprinting and the license is revoked, who is notified?
The fingerprinting notifies us that the person that has an active license has been convicted of a felony and incarcerated. So once we have that information, the agency is the one that revokes the license. As far as notification, there's no official notification to anybody. The license would show revoked in our website. So if you look for the licensed applicant, then it will show that the license has been revoked. It will not show the reason why.
If I may chime in, Haya.
Yeah, please go ahead, Ken.
The applicant or the licensee would be notified as well.
Oh, that's right. They get a letter, right?
Yes, ma'am. After notice, we will revoke.
Sorry, I went to say the same thing and realized I was not unmuted. So thank you, Kenny, for adding that.
So
Great,
the letter would be sent to the record to the address on file, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And it looks like we are, and if I'll give a few moments to see if there's any follow-up questions to that response. If you do have any further questions or comments you would like to ask, you can always use the contact information that was provided on the TCEQ Texas Register notice or the contact information from these web pages that are provided. Staff is happy to answer your questions. And also you can, as I've mentioned several times, we still have these written comments today that you can submit up until 11:59 p.m. on March 12th. But we really appreciate everybody's participation in these rulemaking processes. We highly appreciate the participation from the public, and we thank you for your time today, and we hope you see you again further along in the process. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.